All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Does that sound good? All right, cool.
Mhm.
So, hi everyone. I'm Megan Moody. I'm the Immersive Technologies Librarian at the University of Rochester River Campus Libraries. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's our very first event for our Studio X speaker series, Voices of XR. As the hub for immersive technologies at the University of Rochester, Studio X fosters a community of cross-disciplinary collaboration, exploration, and peer-to-peer learning that lowers barriers to entry, inspires experimentation, and drives innovative research and teaching. So I would like to thank Edja Tankal and Carmen Aguilar-Wedge, the co-founders of hyphen-labs, for joining us today. They're going to discuss their research that examines the concept of immersion and blending of the physical and digital worlds. Founded in 2014, hyphen-labs is an award-winning international collective of women based in London. Their projects oscillate between technology, design, art, and science and futurism to challenge conventions and stimulate conversation. Drawing from their diverse perspectives, ranging from engineering to game design and architecture, they cultivate a resolutely global and multidisciplinary approach to explore a future built on planetary centered design, placing collective needs and experiences at the center of perpetually evolving narratives. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat. We'll have some time at the end for a Q&A and conversation. And then lastly, just a note that we are recording this meeting and it will be available later on the Studio X website. And with that, I'd just like to welcome Carmen and Edja.
Thank you very much for
Hello.
having us. Hello. This is Ece, and that's Carmen. You can see us on the screen too. I'm on the left, Carmen's on the right. So we met in Barcelona. This is probably like our first picture working together, Carmen, no? And we met in this very experimental architecture school where we were exposed to many different technologies like digital fabrication, robotics, interaction, and computational design. And we didn't want to go back to what we were doing before. And we wanted to continue to research and engage with complex ideas through what we learned there, creating objects and spaces so that we can talk about the issues that we deeply, deeply cared about. So as Megan was saying, we opened our studio in 2014, which allowed us to explore ideas of translating between different realities, experimenting in different mediums, and collaborating with incredible, awesome people between disciplines. And by creating, materializing, building, and learning has been a very empowering experience for us, because as women at the margins of technology, I come from Turkey, I'm trained in architecture. Carmen is half Mexican, half American, and in her previous life, she was a civil engineer. So we were really underrepresented in our field. So we want to use our storytelling abilities and our tech expertise to explore the boundaries of our imagination, to connect and share our experiences with the world. And we're always trying to attempt to take a playful and very loving approach. So today we picked 4 projects to talk about how we approach immersion through different mediums and points. And we're going to start with the first one.
Yeah, so we think about immersion as it's applied to all of the realities. We have like our physical reality, our digital reality. And so the first part that we wanted to talk about is like how we give our audience an access into our minds, exploring how we use the idea of embodiment with avatars, the idea of mixing the digital and the physical space by like crossing the threshold, creating experiences that incorporate objects and actual elements that then are translated into virtual scenes, and using sound to enhance the storytelling experience. So the first project that we'll talk about is NSAF, which you guys may have seen before. This is a project that we worked on in 2017 with a collaborator, Ashley Bacchus-Clark. We showed it at Sundance, and we would bring it to festivals. And as you guys know, film festivals are now expanding into, virtual reality and mixed reality experiences as a new way to tell stories, because the space is intentional. It's 3D, so you have total control as a creator of like where to point people and how to have experiences that we can't really represent necessarily in a 2D flat screen. So this is an example of NSAF's physical space. It is a neurocosmetology lab, and we wanted to create a familiar environment, which is a salon, to make the experience more seamless. And following the experience, visitors are invited to look at objects that we've created. As you can see here, one is a microaggression deflecting visor. And then when they go into the VR experience, they also become one of the characters. And this was, in order to create good pieces of mixed reality, virtual reality, it's important to see a lot of virtual reality. And we hadn't really seen many experiences around storytelling that used a mirror as the vehicle for embodiment. So in this lab, you see here Brooks and Naima, and they're the pioneers of brain science. And you become a contributor to something that we call the synaptic lineage. And this is a story that's all about imagining Black women as the pioneers of brain science. And Ashley Bacchus-Clark, who's our collaborator and who I've known for about like 17 years. We went to undergrad together and have kind of grown up together. And she joined us to make this project as we were also struggling with the realities of police brutality and how do we imagine futures and collaborate with friends that empower them to create what they want to see. So in the experience, you go into this future space that kind of leaves the physical world behind, which is great with VR and with these gaming technologies, is you can play with the laws of physics. So, and you can really give your audience a tunnel into how we're thinking and what we're seeing in our own imagination. In this space also, you lose your body. So there's a tension between what does it feel like to move through space without a body, and having kind of like in some ways, like a trip that you go on, and you meet certain deities and they tell you something. And so this was the virtual world that you would experience once you're in the physical salon. And accompanying that were objects that we created digitally to have part of the story. They made up the environment of the kind of non-physical world, and then also to respond to the problems of our reality, which is that we live in a surveillance culture that doesn't cater to anybody who isn't identified as the majority. So we created objects like a translucent sunscreen that wouldn't leave a white film on melanin skin, earrings that could record and like had a mic and video to record police brutality, a scarf that would confuse computer vision systems, a visor that deflects microaggressions, and the most speculative part, which is the vehicle for the story itself, are the Octavia electrodes, which are transcranial stimulation devices that are used through braiding techniques. And so this was a collaboration with multiple people. Edgy, can you go to the next slide? Obviously, this is not our lived experience, but we wanted to support Ashley and in telling her story, as she's a writer and she's interested in neuro marketing and understanding how do we make decisions. And so as you can see, we had people that we were collaborating with throughout throughout the world, and it was really important to get this project done because we had about 6 months to do it. So we'll give you a little teaser video. Hopefully the audio works, so you can enjoy it.
Can you hear the audio?
No.
Because when I take out my... Can you hear it now? Okay.
This was also our first kind of production in virtual reality. So the big question for us is like, does the project need to be VR, or does it need to be, can you tell the story in a flat screen? What we were trying to do was simulate this idea of optimizing our minds, and how the only way that we could really do that was through a VR experience, which is why we chose it as the medium.
Our next project looks at a more analog version of immersion. In this one, our idea was to give people a chance to tunnel into their device's mind so that they can examine their relationship with the digital platforms and the powers behind these technologies, and look at what we're calling the black box paradox. In 2019, we were selected as the lead artists for Tate Modern State Exchange. And each year they give a theme, and we were giving the theme power. And we were thinking, what's the most powerful entity in our lives? And we were thinking that the thing that holds the most power when we look around, that we can connect with all the people, are our phones, no? And then when you think about immersion too, it's also a great immersive tool. Like personally, when I'm scrolling through feeds, I sometimes have this like out of body experience where when I put my head up, I'm like, wow, that was a ride. But that also is the tool where it breaks the immersion too, no? When you're having a deep conversation with your friend, or when you're at theater, or when you're watching a movie, when it starts buzzing, it also breaks that immersion. So we wanted to integrate that. How can we talk about this? How can we make people aware of that? So we call it higher resolution, because resolution in our digital world is to see clearly, no? And we wanted to demystify this blurry back end of the technologies that we use. So with this commission from Tate, we took this as an opportunity to learn as a studio and to create an intervention for the public. We collaborated with our dear friend, Caroline Sinders, who is also interrogating artificial intelligence systems, privacy, data privacy, and is collaborating with many, many people. And we wanted to understand our relationship with these platforms together. So this is the space. It's at the 5th floor on Tate Modern, and it has a lot of foot traffic actually, because people who go up to see the terrace and the nice view of London, they start walking down and they kind of end up in this space. But this space is not your average actual like white cube gallery. It has to be a space for active participation. You cannot be just there passively consuming art. It's made for people to come and do something together. So we approached this, and it's also a huge space, by the way. So we approached this by building a number of architectural spaces, something that we know how to do, within the floor, which then we can use as a metaphor to highlight the interactions that we have in our online spaces. For example, here you see a physical representation of a space like Twitter, where you don't need to sign in to access the content. And we called it the town hall, where it's like a public square for speaking loudly, where your voice is heard and it's amplified, and it can spread virally. It can also be sometimes misinterpreted. So in here, we hosted a series of talks, discussions, and debates. And Mozilla Foundation hosted some lunchtime talks where people will come and learn about the specific details about about their phones. Here you see the park bench. It's kind of like a semi-public space where you really don't mind being overheard by a stranger or two, but this is a place where you have to sign in to access the content. And here we curated couple of video installations, and we had more physical activities in the space. Here is a semi-private space for friends and friends of friends to debate and have a conversation, talk and chill. It's kind of like a WhatsApp group where it's invite only.
And also a living room.
And it's the living room. And here we held more intimate workshops like a tarot reading or a digital aura reading workshop. And finally, we had the loo, which has been created to mimic the most intimate and private of all of the spaces. And here we had this installation called Cached, where depending on your online behavior, it kind of pooped out a receipt of the traits of your character, and then kind of cleared all the cache that it collected from you. We also had a spell that was written for the Silicon Valley giants to protect us, to protect ourselves from them. And this whole space was connected via this imaginary infrastructure, which kind of functioned as a troubleshooting diagram, because it's a space where a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds walks in. No, like there are many tourists, there are people from a lot of ages, and then there are many things going on. So we wanted to give people something that they can prime themselves into having these conversations and follow very easily on the space with their bodies, and then kind of create their own narrative and follow this path. So this troubleshooting diagram started with a very, very easy question, like actually a big question though: how did we get here? It makes you think about many, many things, but the answers were like very easy yes and no questions, like did you get here by a plane or a train or by a car or by public transport? And all of these questions were asked so that people would be aware of all the information that they're shedding when they're coming to this space. Like, did you use the biometric passport when you were entering UK, or did you take an Uber? Do you always accept cookies? And then after all this questions, they were then led to this wall where, depending on the answers they've given, they were confronted with that malicious future of the internet, of the digital space, which is sold to us as this thing that makes our lives easier, kind of like emotion recognition, political prediction and targeting, or facial recognition. And on this wall, we also had a physical like, which we collaborated with Random Happiness. There was this blue ink where you can leave your physical like on the wall with your thumb. And throughout this whole 2 weeks, we hosted many, many different events and workshops. This is from the Great Hack panel we did with Mozilla and Caroline Sanders. I don't know if you've seen Great Hack. It's a documentary that talks about the Cambridge Analytica. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. And we had a taped late event with Libby Heaney, where she has this project called deep fake karaoke, where you can you can become Elvis Presley or Whitney Houston when you're singing on the screen. We also had these interactive installations. This is the tarot reading workshop in the living room. We also had this performance where the public would tape their thumbs so they couldn't scroll more or they couldn't use their phones. And at the end, we wanted to end it in a nice and happy note. No, we held this yin yoga workshop, and we also had a sound bath, because we wanted to cleanse and we wanted to start fresh with the technology and with these powers. We also had a lot of cookies around. So you can think about next time you are accepting cookies online. And wanted to continue with another project we finished last year. It's called The Gospel According to Jan. So we're residents in Somerset House, and Somerset House had this exhibition called 24/7. It was based on Jonathan Crary book by the same name, 24/7. And as the quote goes, like you can see, there are now very few significant interludes of human existence, with the colossal exception of sleep, that have not been penetrated and taken over as work time, consumption time, or marketing time. You know, we online shop 24, we can online shop for 24 hours. We are entertained 24/7. We have lost the ability to daydream at the bus stop, because there's always something more entertaining one scroll away or one click away. And what is more worrying is the companies like Netflix are now listing sleep as their main competitor, not like Disney Channel or HBO or other places. So we wanted to create this photo booth that played on the phenomena of contagious yawning, so that we can signal and trigger sleeping states where we are not consuming in this digital age. We also wanted to collect this big database of yawns.
And also the photo booth is like a very familiar thing. We all know how to use it. Kind of like the salon space too. You know how to go in there, so you don't have to convince people to be immersed. They're willing, they enter the space, they cross that threshold, being willing and able. Also making it a nice pink and having a light booth itself creates like the perfect conditions for selfies. So whether people went in there to take a selfie or not, we end up kind of collecting them, especially if they watch the film and end up yawning.
Yeah, and we like recontextualizing the already known spaces, so people know what to do. But there's always this like unexpected thing that would happen to you when you enter. So in this booth, you would enter and you would see the movie we made specifically to make you yawn, and then we create this camera, or machine learning, that would detect your yawning. And then at the very end of the exhibition, you would go through the whole exhibition and then you would see yourself yawning. Here's kind of like how it looked like in the end. And I'm going to show you the video.
So it kind of bookmarked the whole show, where it was talking about like different parts of sleep and this culture of being awake all the time, being attached to your notifications, and different interventions. So, and this was a free piece as well in the front, but to see yourself yawning in the back, you'd have to go through the entire exhibition. Yeah.
And then as a winter season, Somerset House selected our yawning icon to signal to whole London to take a deep breath, relax a little, maybe sleep, so they're not constantly consuming and the city is not constantly running. So it was flapping the whole time in winter. And then here is the video that was shown inside the photo booth. Can you guys hear it? Okay.
It's tough to quit scrolling. Just ask any of the 2.71 billion smartphone users who continue to browse, regardless of the toll on their sleep. Our sleep is in danger. Corporations list sleep as a primary business competitor, designing addictive interfaces to keep us on the conveyor belt of consumption. If capitalism's quest is to control all of human life, sleep is our last resistance. So what can you do? In a world in which sleep itself becomes an act of resistance, yawning can get us there. Sleep will save us. Yawn, and yawn often. Yawn for your right to sleep and dream. Yawn to resist the commodification of sleep. Enjoy a yawn. Today.
It's okay to yawn.
This broadcast has been developed for 24/7 by hyphen-labs. Side effects may include drowsiness, snoring, comfort, dreams, rest, regular heart rate, pain relief, energy, good humor, good complexion, appetite, optimism, and productivity. To join the resistance, turn off all notifications and all electronic devices. Here ends the reading of the Gospel according to Yawn.
So we like to have fun with our projects as well. And we like to, in a way, kind of troll people into thinking about the things that we're thinking about. And so another project, or I guess another part of immersion that we'll talk about, is how we use storytelling, and we have this innate need to anthropomorphize things. And as we move into a more like animate, inanimate, human machine world, we must think about, how do we make decisions? How will our machines make decisions? And so we will be talking about a project where we're kind of letting the audience tunnel their mind onto the project itself. So in this project, we're thinking about time. We're thinking about metacognition, so thinking about thinking. Using I guess the dictionary definition of immersion is like a deep mental involvement. So having the time and the space to really focus and think without being distracted, or what imagination mapping looks like, and the question of choice versus control, and giving the audience the ability to author the experience itself. So this is a project that we worked on recently called Push Me, Pull You. It is currently being shown in Berlin, and it opened for Berlin Art Week in September. And in this project, we collaborated with a neuroscientist, John Dylan Haynes, who's looking at the idea of free will and privacy, neuromarketing, science fiction, and science as fact. And over our collaboration, we talked a lot about predictability and how humans end up being quite predictable. So we don't necessarily need a neural link to know what we like. You can just look at our phones, our like habits on Facebook and Instagram or Netflix will give us and even Google Maps will give us a better idea of who we are than if we were to have a chip in us or something. So when we were thinking about the installation, we keep coming back to technology. We keep coming back to this, like these powerful tools that we have, and the fact that we don't know them very well, and how do we become more intimate with them? How do we know what is pushing them, what is pulling, and also for ourselves, what is pushing our decisions and pulling those? One of the things that he finds in his research and he looks at is the fact that 7 to 10 seconds before we become consciously aware of a decision that we've made, our brain has made it for us. And so that opens up the question of free will and determinism. Do we have a choice? Does our conscious have a choice to change the decision that our brain has already made? So we used the idea of the mind and the body problem, which is like, where does our mind exist? Where the borders of our consciousness? Is it attached to our body? Is it and realistically, our brain is what makes the mind work. So we wanted to create this a similar idea of the rock, which represents the brain and the matter, and tied to a balloon, which are our thoughts, and having these Roombas, which are kind of housebound robots that do a task for us, giving them the ability to make decisions on their own, and looking at how individual decisions impact collective behavior. So when you enter the space, you are You see that there's a room with these robots. There's two push pedals. One says push me, one says pull you. And each one gives the group, our little group of robots, either a more deterministic or flocking behavior, or a free will and a diffusion behavior. And when they begin to act in the based on those algorithms, which allows them to make decisions based on their neighbors, we can see kind of a choreography of their movements painted on the walls of the space. So as you can see, there's kind of different modes. When we look at deterministic thinking and how to equate that with an algorithm, we started to look at the collective, and that automatically drew us to the idea of swarm behavior and looking at swarms to define our behavior. And in swarms, there isn't a collective process or like computer that directs all of the movement. Rather, each one has a set of directions. They're not aware of the overall goal of the robots, but they end up organizing collectively. And inside the space, we had an arena, which we would think of as kind of our boundaries or the laws of physics, or the social norms and conventions and the culture that we live within. But there is also a small trap door that they can escape from, getting more access to the rest of the space, and sometimes bringing others with them. And sometimes they're able to even kind of get on top of the push pedal themselves and change the behavior. And what was really interesting about this project was that the moment that we would look at this little swarm of robots, we would begin to put our own experiences and project our own experiences onto their behavior and see where they collided. Kind of outside of the arena, we have fans, which we think of as these external forces, kind of like social media, whether that's the ideologies that we've grown up in, or the different influences that we have. So what that does is it creates a tension between the thoughts or the consciousnesses that are attached to the balloons. And so sometimes we look at the robots and we wonder what is pulling and what is pushing. Are our influences pushing our brains, or our brains pulling our thoughts? We can look at a couple of, here's like a small video that someone posted. It's on the right, I think, that is like, is this love? Because these kind of interactions would happen. So we are kind of always looking at like, how does our consciousness and mediated perceptions or ever-present actors in our narratives. We explore like human and more than human and non-human ways of existence through our practice, challenging notions of authorship, determinism, transfer, and replication. And we admire these collisions and entanglements between like the arts and the sciences, architecture and engineering, precision chaos, organic, artificial mental states and their embodiments. So so that's kind of it in terms of the projects that we've done that we think are quite immersive and that talk about immersion, or that we've experienced immersion in. And I know that we're done a little bit early, but this does also leave a bunch of times for kind of a discussion if you guys want to have that. So thank you guys for having us. And yeah, it's been really fun to talk about the projects.
Thank you both so much. It was very informative and thought-provoking. And before we dive into questions, I just wanted to read you a couple of the comments from the chat here. Folks were loving the spells and cleansing and embodied interventions. And then we had a lot of folks who really responded to the yawning project and were yawning themselves, and also really leaning into the resistance, the method of sleeping, and how it's something that you don't always think about, but it's so fundamental and important. And so with that, I want to start taking a few questions. I will kick this off with one that I have. So something that I really like about your work is that there's with all of these projects, there's always this like very tactile, like physical aspect. And then you also you really look at the mind-body connection. So one example is with the NSAF installation, you had the physical beauty shop that the user would enter before they go into the black box of VR. And I'm thinking about that physical connection with VRs is and just in being virtual right now and in this pandemic, and we're all increasingly having these virtual lives, recognizing that importance. So why do you think it's important to center the tactile and physical when imagining digital experiences or spaces?
I guess we kind of got sick of going to spaces that were featuring VR and having it be like, okay, we'll sit down in this chair. It doesn't matter what your space is. And now put the VR goggles on and now believe that you're in this new place. And that felt very jarring for us. And it felt like it wasn't thoughtful. And I think maybe as
also lazy.
Yeah, and lazy, and it was really more of like an opportunity for us to be more creative and artistic and practice our design, which is really fun for us, because it's like, okay, well, there's this space that is empty for design, like what can we do in it?
Also, I think because you in our experience, you are embodying this body, no? So you are looking at a mirror, and then you kind of really have to feel that you are in that space. Oftentimes we would see people, they would sit down on the chair and they would automatically take the shape of what they're seeing in the mirror, because they know that, because they already entered that hair salon, because they know that in the physical space too, they're in a hair salon. I think it really helps people to kind of imagine themselves in that space as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also what's important is around access. And how do people access the story or the narrative? There were people who were like, VR, didn't want to look at VR. But it was still important for us to talk about the fact that we were living in a 2016 America where Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Sandra Bland, all of these people were these Black men and women were continuing to be assaulted. And what was a way for Ashley, myself, and Eje and Nitsan to respond to these this situation that we found ourselves in, which we're still in, and so to create objects that would actually respond to Ashley's needs and her community's needs. So rather than trying to create something for someone, giving her the opportunity to create these objects with us, since we are really interested in also making work that looks at things with a critical lens, and trying to interrogate who we are as people and what our role is as designers. And so I think that creating objects made it tangible for our parents, and who didn't necessarily have access to a VR headset, or very young people who also couldn't necessarily go do VR pieces. I guess that you're not supposed to do them before you're 13 because your eyes are, it's a 4-minute piece, but we made it accessible for we wanted to just make it as accessible as possible. So doing that through a space doing that through objects and doing that through VR. And then also looking at how can you apply science to this. Something that I actually left out was that we were quite interested in seeing if VR could change people's bias. So we collaborated with Intel, who sent an anthropologist with us to the festivals to ask like short form and long form questions before and after the experience about where do you come from, how old are you, what's your demographic, do you have relationships with Black women, do you see them in media, and seeing if like how people's implicit bias, which I would change, and that already has its own, that test, which is like from Harvard, already has its own issues. So we kind of remade it, and we found that actually people who have prejudices probably won't change. But we then ended up working with this amazing researcher, Hope, from Atlanta, and she was looking at how do we inspire young people to see themselves in technology, and instead of trying to do implicit bias tests to like, you know, adults, doing it not implicit bias, but more like imagination opening tests with like young girls, and showing that their capacity to see themselves in these spaces as creators, as developers, as writers and storytellers increased a lot. So where we were trying to do the science like didn't necessarily work, but that's why collaborating with other people is so important, because they have a vision of how they can use what has been made in a new way than we had imagined. So making a bigger impact, I think, and being able to inform work that will continue to be impactful as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that the question of accessibility is something that we're also constantly thinking about. And then I think also for this specific topic, and you know, I really like that you extended the VR experience, because oftentimes you go into these experiences and then it's over, right? Like that was your time. And I think that the other projects and the products around it really help to expand and continue that conversation post the experience.
I see a question here about like collecting data and the role of VR. Since we were doing anthropological tests, yeah, we did collect data, but we did try to publish a paper on it, but I think we were also a bit coming up to the problem of like, what is our control? How do we measure for control? So it was a learning curve. I mean, we didn't necessarily get an answer, but I think that there's like a rigor of science that needs to be applied when you do VR experiences that is also still being defined. Also see that there's a what did the participants see on VR? I can drop a link in. There's a YouTube video.
Or if you have an Oculus at home, it's on Oculus Store too. It's for free. Accessibility hashtag.
Yes, but like we let's see if I can find it. But we have it's available on the go. If you look up neurospeculative Afrofeminism.
Available on the go, also on the Oculus Rift. It was tough optimizing. So one technical thing, you have to think about how to optimize your VR experience.
Okay, so I dropped a link in there. That's to, and I'll also do it to the Oculus. And there's a lot of trolls. The reality is, like, if you look at some of the comments that were, okay, yeah. There was a lot of resistance also to the piece itself when we released it into kind of the more public realm. So you do put yourself as creators in a vulnerable position by trying to make it totally accessible, because there's a lot of people who are like, this is like feminist, and like, what do you not see men in the world, or I don't know. They're saying that there was like a total waste of time. I mean, it really was 4 minutes, so it's, I don't know. I think that probably all the Fox News they watch is a lot of waste of time too, but whatever.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions, or Emily, did you want to ask one?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. Thank you both for talking about your projects. It was just amazing. One of the things that I was really struck by is how much you focus on human-centered design. And you've talked a little bit about this, but how do you approach designing for groups with different backgrounds or experiences than you? And you talked a little bit about some of your collaborators, but I think it's a really important question and is core in a lot of your projects. And so I was wondering if you could just tell us some strategies you have when trying to approach a project through user-centered design. Just like give us some tips if you don't mind.
Approach a project. I heard like collaborate. You like human.
Yeah, so a lot of your work focuses on user-centered design. There is like, there's an experience you're imagining the user to have that you're creating in your storytelling. And I was wondering if you could just talk about, if you're thinking about diverse audiences and trying to reach different audiences, what are some places you start from when you're thinking about that sort of human-centered design aspect? I don't know if that makes sense.
I would say that we are more trying to make work that's for ourselves. So it's like really from our own curiosity. What is something that we're interested in? What is something that, and we find that like other people naturally might also be interested in that. And it allows us to, I mean, it's always the worst thing when you're trying to push something and force something that you feel is inauthentic to you. So making like committing to working on things that you're interested in, that will, I think that's what like creates the passion, right? And and that passion can be infectious. And we often work with other people who have a project that they're really passionate about, and how can we support them? We have certain toolkits that we use within like, or that we're familiar with like game design, video production, audio, 3D, like, and speculative design, that people come to us and ask for our feedback on, so that it kind of always is a collaboration rather than, I guess, trying to make it more like hierarchical rather than like hierarchical, has helped us kind of.
Also, I think even though like most of our projects, let's say, they're talking about mainstream things, but they're always looking at it from a different perspective. So along the way, by getting here, we collected a lot of friends that want to see that fresh perspective from there. So we have this like huge collaborator network now, I'd say. So when we want to do something like for example, swarm intelligence, or this like yawn detection and all those things that are looking at the problems that we want to talk about from another way, we kind of reach out to them, and we can find these people because we, I guess, magneted or kind of have them around us, no? So kind of have the people like us around us.
Edge's fan club. No.
hyphen-labs fan club.
I'm the director of that fan club. But yeah, I think like having, like being connected to other creators is really important, being inspired by their work, like being able to collaborate with Caroline Cinders. And that's the thing, is that we aren't necessarily we cannot be experts in everything. We can add our own style, we can add our own flavor, our own interests, and infuse that into something. But collaboration is about working with experts from different disciplines so that we can we can ask the questions that other people might also want answers to. And I think what we're trying to do is that translation of maybe like high tech things like machine learning and privacy and like whatever the black box is of technology, trying to translate that to people who don't necessarily come from that background, which is ourselves, and making that accessible. So, and I think like user-centered design is like,
we want to see it more like humanity-centered design or planetary-centered design rather than just user or human. Also something that I think Carmen mentioned earlier, but it's an important sentence, and it's kind of like the core in most of our projects. Like, we don't design for the people, we are designing with the people. So it's not us doing the work, but we are always, sometimes we are the holding pieces, sometimes they hold, but it's always like this same weight of collaboration. We're not enforcing our ideas on some other people's experiences. If that makes sense.
That's great. Thank you so much.
I think we'll see, maybe one more question. So something that we've been thinking about is using the tools that are largely inaccessible to create with. And so, for example, I was showing some VR experiences to some students, and sort of throwing them in headsets, but the headsets, one of my students had an afro, and it was very difficult. Like, it was something that I hadn't initially thought of, but then in that moment I was like, this is not a tool that is for everybody. So, and I feel like that's not just relevant to headsets, but also to our 3D authoring tools. So I'm wondering if that's also been your experience, and like, how do you navigate that? How do you use these tools, and then also like to create really experiences that are very, very inclusive and very critical, and interrogate, I think, technologies very thoughtfully, but also like we're still using these tools to make these experiences, to make these projects.
Yeah, VR headsets are, I mean, even seat belts, they're notoriously made for everybody, but based on one person's body, or one type of person's body, which is exactly why it's like, make something for yourself. Make the experience reflect, and the tools that you're going to use or make reflect who you are, or the people or the community that you want to access it. That's why we put the VR piece on YouTube 360s. And have to be just viewed with a headset, but it could be it could be with a phone, because you can kind of get the same, or with cardboard, because not only is it like that, but also with hair, but also if you have like a flatter nose, there's like a bunch of light leaks that happen. So VR is not a it's not a perfect tool. Even this, and the software itself is problematic. The reason why we had to make NSAF was because we could not find avatars that were not sexualized, that were not stereotypical, that were not that were nuanced and deviated from a Grand Theft Auto style game. So that's why we have to make our own things. And I think that, I guess, one of the things that we practice is that there's a bunch of people who are trying to change from the inside, institutions, or groups, or like politics or design, these like mega giants. But what we're trying to do is kind of create our own thing, and do something that responds to how we see design and how we want to practice, because we're very thankful and very privileged to be able to work in this space and to have the opportunity to be in collaborating with people. And it's important that by that, I guess that's how we can do something, is by making something that's different from the existing systems that don't work for us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think we've got 2 minutes left, so I'll just wrap up quickly. Yeah, so thank you, Eja and Carmen, for joining us. We are so grateful to have learned more about your thoughtful and inspiring work. And thanks for spending some time with us and answering our questions. I would also like to thank Dean Marianne Mavernack and Dean Wendy Heinzelman for their continued support for Studio X and the River Campus Libraries for funding this series. Also, thank you to all of our attendees here. If you would like to continue following hyphen-labs work, please check out their website. We will post that link in the chat in just a second. And also stay tuned for future Studio X events and workshops. They're always posted to the Studio X website. We'll also post that link in the chat. And I just want to plug our next chat, which is happening next month on November 18th at 1 p.m. We have Carl Domingo from Unity 3D with us. He'll be presenting on his work to support student communities and how XR is used across different industries. So that's all I've got. Thank you all and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
And if any of you guys want to get in touch, I'm just dropping our email in there, projects@hyphen-labs.com. We'd be happy to talk, and if you guys need anything.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.